January 12th, 1944, Stalag Luft III, Sagen, Germany. 21:47 hours. Snow drifted in thin, ghostly sheets across the frozen courtyard. The barracks' windows glowed faintly, their frost-covered glass trembling with the cold. Beyond the perimeter, the dark outline of pine trees swayed in the wind, their branches clicking like bones. Floodlights swept in slow arcs across the camp, pale yellow beams gliding over barbed wire, watchtowers, and the paths where German sentries paced in thick wool coats. Inside Barracks Block 104, the air was thick with pipe smoke, damp wool, and the quiet murmur of exhausted men. A deck of cards slapped against a table in one corner. Someone tuned a makeshift radio in another. But at the center of the room, sitting cross-legged on the wooden floor beneath a dim bulb, Flight Sergeant Tommy Vale twisted a loop of wire between his fingers. He shouldn't have had wire at all, not in a POW camp where metal scraps were contraband. But Tommy Vale had a gift for making things appear out of nowhere. Tonight, he threaded the wire through a large brown button taken from a worn-out RAF greatcoat. He twisted it tight, creating a tiny loop on each side. Then he held both wire ends, one in each hand, and began spinning the button until the wire twisted into a tight spiral. A German guard walking past the barracks window paused, squinting inside. Tommy looked up, gave a harmless smile, and spun the button again. The guard snorted. "Kinderspielzeug," he muttered. "Children's toy." He moved on. Tommy exhaled slowly. Good. The trick was to make every German in the camp believe he was just passing time, a bored prisoner keeping his hands busy with a childish contraption. But the men sitting closest to Tommy knew the truth. They watched the spinning button the way sailors watch a compass needle. Because here, in one of Germany's most heavily guarded POW camps, that toy was not a toy at all. It was a signal device, a coded instrument for MI9, Britain's secret escape organization. Tommy spun the wire again. The button blurred into a dark circle. Then he tugged gently. The circle flipped. To the untrained eye, it meant nothing. To his fellow prisoners, it meant direction east. A second tug, a slightly different rhythm, meant clear. This was how escapes were coordinated. A spinning toy, a simple flip, and the right men watching. No guard would ever suspect it. No German would ever decode it. Tonight's signal was especially dangerous. Tommy looked toward the far bunk where Lieutenant Harry Kestrel, a wiry bomber navigator with sharp eyes and sharper instincts, sat pretending to read a dog-eared novel. The men had spent weeks tunneling, weeks stealing spoons, hiding dirt in their trousers and dropping it casually during exercise periods. Weeks timing sentries, memorizing rotations, bribing guards with cigarettes, forging papers from Red Cross forms. All of it came down to Tommy's fingers and the slightest spin of a wire toy. He twisted the wire again, ready to deliver the final signal MI9 had approved. He inhaled through his nose, feeling the cold draft against the floorboards. He waited for the guard's footsteps to fade. He listened for the clack of the floodlight rotating away from their window. Then, with a steady breath, he spun the button. The toy hummed softly. One tug, two flips, pause, one long twist. Lieutenant Kestrel closed his book. His eyes gleamed. The signal was clear, unmistakable. Escape at 2340, Tunnel 3, Group A only. Tommy pulled the spinning toy to a stop, letting it dangle innocently. The button swayed like a child's bauble. Meaningless, invisible, safe. But every man who had seen it now carried the same thought pounding in his chest. Tonight, someone would risk everything. Tonight, the toy would guide men to freedom.
January 12, 1944, Stalag Luft III, Barracks Block 104, 22:03 hours. The barracks settled into an eerie stillness. Cards were gathered, pipes extinguished, boots unlaced and set neatly by bunks. Every man moved with deliberate normalcy, the kind that Germans expected from prisoners preparing for another freezing night behind barbed wire. But beneath this calm exterior, tension coiled like a spring. Eyes drifted toward Tommy Vale, toward the button toy now resting harmlessly beside his cot, toward Lieutenant Harry Kestrel, who quietly folded his book and slipped it under his mattress. Conversation shifted into meaningless chatter. Rugby scores, food rations, speculation about the weather. Not one word about tunnels, not one mention of escape. MI9's golden rule echoed in every prisoner's mind. Never speak a signal, only show it. Tommy lifted a tin mug and sipped his watery tea. His right foot tapped once against the floor. A subtle confirmation. Kestrel caught it. Across the room, Sergeant Colin Fryer pretended to doze, his blanket pulled just high enough to cover the corner of his eyes. He counted the seconds between guard footsteps, syncing them with the planned escape window. Outside, icy wind lashed against thin boards. A distant German shepherd barked. A rifle bolt clacked near the perimeter tower. Floodlights hummed loudly as their mechanical gears rotated left, then right, slicing white beams over the snow. The timing had to be perfect. The floodlight had a 7-second blind angle on its rotation, a flaw the prisoners had studied for months. 7 seconds of darkness, 7 seconds to slip past a window, 7 seconds to duck beneath the barracks and reach the trapdoor leading into Tunnel 3. Kestrel stood slowly, stretching his arms. A guard outside glanced toward the window. Seeing nothing suspicious, he continued down the path, boots crunching softly over snow. Tommy's heart thudded. This was it. Kestrel slid toward the back of the barracks, passing between bunks. He nodded to Fryer. The sergeant lifted his blanket and whispered a single word, so faint it dissolved into the air. Go. Kestrel pressed himself against the cold wall. The floodlights swept left. He closed his eyes, listening. The hum rose. The gears whined. The light passed overhead. Blind angle. Kestrel moved, silent as breath, swift as instinct. He drifted past the window, ducked under a hanging coat, and reached the vent hatch beneath the back bunk. His fingers slid under the wooden slat. He lifted carefully, slow enough not to creak. The vent opened. Cold air rushed out, carrying the faint scent of soil and chalked tunnel beams. Tunnel 3 waited below. Dark, cramped, salvation. Kestrel slipped inside, boots brushing the ladder rungs. The vent closed behind him without a sound. Above, Tommy inhaled shakily. He spun the button toy once more, quietly, quickly, a secondary signal meant only for the two shadow watchers monitoring the barracks doorway. 2 flips, short pause, 1 twist. Phase 1 complete. The men who understood it stiffened briefly, then relaxed, returning to their facades, yawning, adjusting blankets, muttering to themselves. To any German guard, the room looked like nothing more than a group of tired prisoners settling into another miserable night. But beneath their feet, the escape was already unfolding. Tunnel 3, 2209 hours. The tunnel was narrow, barely wide enough for a man to crawl. Wooden slats reinforced its walls, and rope lights, cowered by smuggled batteries, ran along the ceiling like veins. The air smelled of damp earth and kerosene. Lieutenant Kestrel crouched, feeling the cold soil through his uniform. He crawled forward, hands brushing the smooth boards that hundreds of prisoners had hammered into place with stolen tools and pure determination. Behind him, Corporal James Halley slid down the ladder. "You ready?" he whispered. Kestrel exhaled. "As ready as I'll ever be." Halley smirked. "Tommy give the signal?" Kestrel nodded. "That toy of his might save half this camp before winter's done." Halley chuckled softly. "MI9 will knight him with a button and a piece of string." They crawled on. Ahead, the tunnel sloped upward toward the exit hatch, a disguised patch of frozen soil near the outer fence. But the timing was razor thin. They needed the guard on Tower 3 to light his cigarette, to lean back, to look away for 3 seconds, just 3. Back in the barracks, Tommy Vale waited for that exact moment, gripping the spinning toy between his fingers. His job wasn't done. Not yet. Not until the next signal was sent.
The spin that changed everything. January 12, 1944, 22:17 hours, Barracks Block 104. Tommy Vale sat on the edge of his bunk, the toy dangling from his fingers, spinning gently like a pendulum. Every muscle in his hand was relaxed on the outside, but inside he trembled with tension. The Germans had grown more alert after the last escape attempt in autumn. Even now, their boots thunked heavily along the guard paths outside, leaving vibrations that traveled through the barracks floorboards. 2 bunks down, Sergeant Fryer lay perfectly still, blanket pulled to his chin, eyes tracking Tommy through a narrow slit. Across the room, another prisoner, Flight Lieutenant Merrick, leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, masking his vigil behind a facade of boredom. Every man close to the plan pretended to ignore Tommy, but they all waited for the next signal. Because Kestrel and Halley were now deep inside the tunnel, and Tommy was their clock. He lifted the wire ends gently, letting the button spin. Slow, calm, innocent. The spinning toy hummed softly, the sound swallowed by the murmuring stove and the creak of old timber. Tommy adjusted the tension. The button flipped. 1 flip, 2 flips, pause. That message, proceed to phase 2, traveled across the room through the smallest of glances. Merrick uncrossed his arms for the first time in 20 minutes. Fryer shifted slightly, mimicking discomfort. To a guard, nothing was wrong. To MI9 trained prisoners, the operation had just advanced. Tommy didn't look at anyone. He didn't dare. He kept the toy spinning casually, the same way children across Europe played with a whirligig. And if a German sentry questioned him, he would smile and show how the toy flipped with a simple tug. But the truth was far more dangerous. The flips weren't random. They were a code book in motion. Tunnel 3, 22:19 hours. Kestrel and Halley crawled steadily, breath shallow in the narrow space. The tunnel walls seemed to pulse with every vibration from the guards above. The wooden beams creaked softly, and bits of dirt trickled down with each subtle tremor. Halley whispered, "We must be close. Kestrel nodded. He counted his movements. 4 crawls, 1 pause. 4 crawls, 1 pause. Then, the faintest scratch. He froze. Hallie stopped behind him. Was it a guard? A patrol? An animal? No. It was the coded scrape on the hatch above. 3 quick scratches, pause, 2 scratches. Tommy's second signal. The hatch above was clear. Kestrel inhaled, steadied himself, and pushed upward with both hands. The soil lifted, frozen but thin, exactly as they'd prepared. A slice of moonlight pierced the tunnel, cold air flooded in, snowflakes drifted down into his hair. He peered out. The exit lay beyond the outer fence, concealed between 2 pine roots. Tower 3 stood 40 meters to the right. The guard leaned against the rail, stamping his boots to stay warm. "Timing's good," Hallie whispered. "We need him to light the cigarette," Kestrel replied. "That's Tommy's job." Barracks Block 104, 22:21 hours. Tommy's fingers worked swiftly now, controlling the rhythm as he spun the wire toy. He watched the window in his peripheral vision, paying attention to the floodlight cycles and shadows shifting on the courtyard. The guard in Tower 3 had a habit. Everyone in the barracks knew it. At this exact moment in his patrol hour, he lights a cigarette. The problem, tonight, he wasn't. Tonight he seemed more alert, pacing back and forth restlessly. Tommy adjusted the wire tension. He made the button spin faster. Then he tugged gently, creating a soft flip-click sound, barely audible. It was a decoy, a lure, designed to draw the sentry's curiosity. The guard paused, looked around. Tommy spun the toy again, letting it catch the moonlight just enough through the frosted window to flash briefly. The guard frowned, tilted his head, and for a moment, just a moment, he stopped pacing. Then came the spark, a flame from a lighter, a cigarette igniting between numb fingers. The guard leaned back, cupping his hands around the glow. Tommy tugged the toy once, a single flip. Merrick stood from his chair, stretched theatrically, then sat again. That was the relay confirmation. Phase 3. Exit now. Tunnel 3. Exit. 22:22 hours. Kestrel saw the cigarette's glow, felt the opening. It was time. He crawled out, belly pressed flat to the snow. Hallie followed. Their uniforms blended with the frost as they slid behind the pine tree roots and hugged the earth's contours. The guard exhaled smoke into the wind, oblivious. Kestrel's whispered, "Next run is 20 meters to the tree line." Hallie nodded. "What's the count?" "It's 7 seconds on the floodlight rotation." They waited. The light began its sweep. Left, left, left. The mechanical whine signaled the turn. Kestrel's muscles coiled. Now. They sprinted, low, fast, silent. Snow crunched softly under their boots, breath puffed in white clouds behind them. They dove into the shadows of the tree line just as the floodlight snapped back across the open ground. Hallie pressed a hand over his chest. Bloody hell, that was close. Kestrel grinned, panting. It's supposed to be close. But their escape wasn't over. Not even close. The next step was the most dangerous of all, because the Germans still believed everyone was in the barracks. And Tommy Vale had one final signal to send.
The Toy That Fooled the Watchtowers. January 12, 1944, 2227 hours. Stalag Luft III, courtyard. The winter wind howled across the open parade ground, flinging swirls of snow against the barracks and barbed wire fences. Floodlights carved rotating slices of brilliance through the darkness, sweeping over empty walkways, frozen mud, and the rigid silhouettes of watchtowers. Inside Barracks 104, the atmosphere turned electric. Tommy Vale had already sent his escape timing signal. He had confirmed the hatch was clear. He had sparked the guard's cigarette habit. Now he had to do something far more dangerous. He had to make the Germans believe every prisoner was still in the building. Because if a single guard just sensed, that 2 men were missing, automatic floodlights would blaze, dogs would be unleashed, and the escape would end with bullets in the snow. Tommy let the toy spinning cipher rest on his lap while he listened for the patrol outside. Crunch, crunch, crunch. The guard's boots drew closer, heavy with suspicion. A second pair joined him, then a third. Fryer whispered through clenched teeth. They increased patrols. Tommy nodded. He had expected this. After all, Stalag Luft III was built by Germany specifically to halt escapes, and the guards were paranoid since British officers had pulled off the infamous wooden horse operation months earlier. Tommy lifted the toy again. He gave it a small, deliberate spin, a boyish gesture, something harmless. The nearest guard saw the movement through the window. He stopped, peered inside. Tommy didn't look up. He kept spinning, humming an off-key tune, a bored prisoner on a cold night. After a tense moment, the guard grunted and shook his head. Kinderspiele, child play. But that spin wasn't for the Germans. It was for Merrick, who shifted slightly on his bunk, confirming the next part of the escape plan. Roll call illusion. Merrick snapped his fingers once. Fryer sat up instantly. 3 other prisoners adjusted blankets to make it appear that men were asleep in bunks that were now empty. Stuffed pillows became bodies, folded jackets became shoulders, blankets tucked in just the right way mimicked breathing shapes in the dark. From the hallway, a quick glance would show a full room of sleeping prisoners. It bought Kestrel and Hallie time, but time was running out. Forest Edge, 2230 hours. Kestrel crouched behind a fallen log, breath steaming in the air. The guard's cigarette glow had vanished behind the tower rail. Snow settled silently on his shoulders. Hallie pressed his ear to the ground, listening for movement. Dogs, damn it, north side, coming fast. Kestrel scanned the tree line. The planned rendezvous point, a hollow beneath a split oak trunk, lay another 100 meters away. They needed to reach it before the dogs caught their scent. We move now, Kestrel said. Hallie nodded. They slipped deeper into the woods, hunched low to break their silhouette. Behind them, the hounds barked again, closer this time. Barracks 104, 2232 hours. Tommy's pulse hammered in his ears. He watched shadows shift outside the window. A new patrol, 3 guards now, dogs on leashes. Too close, far too close. He needed a distraction, something subtle, believable, but undeniably attention-grabbing. He flicked the button again, this time letting it spin high enough to make the wire whir. A guard immediately turned his head. Tommy chuckled loudly, pretending to amuse himself. He made the toy spin faster, humming a tune out of rhythm with the toy's oscillation. Another guard joined him, frowning. Tommy continued spinning, letting the toy blur in the dim light. To them, he looked like a man losing his mind to boredom and confinement. But to Fryer, this spin pattern held the meaning, dogs are near, speed extraction. He kicked his bunk leg, a muffled signal. In the woods, Merrick, waiting by the small smuggled receiver, caught it. He tapped his message into the cold pillow speaker. Forest Edge, 2233 hours. Kestrel and Hallie froze as the receiver vibrated softly against Hallie's ribs. He pressed it to his ear, a faint coded pulse. Hallie whispered, "Speed, dogs deployed." Kestrel's jaw tightened. Understood. They sprinted through the snow now, weaving between pines. Their breath burned, their legs screamed, but they didn't stop. The dogs' barking swelled behind them, echoing through the forest like primal thunder. Barracks 104, 2235 hours.
Tommy felt sweat trickling down his spine. The Germans were talking urgently now, pointing towards the woods. One guard radioed up to Tower 3. Tommy's fingers twitched. He spun the toy again, this time slow. A signal of status check. Merrick blinked twice. Fryer nodded. All they could do now was trust Kestrel and Hallie to outrun dogs, guards, and the night itself. If they didn't, the toy would become evidence. The entire barracks would be punished, and Tommy Vale would never forgive himself. Forest clearing, 2237 hours. The oak tree appeared at last, a massive dark silhouette against the moonlit sky. Their rendezvous point. Hallie slid beneath the hollow first. Kestrel followed, pulling branches over them. The dogs burst into the clearing seconds later. They sniffed violently, growled. Then, confusion. Kestrel grinned through shallow breaths. They lost our scent. Hallie whispered, "Soap dust in the snow." "Brilliant!" The guards cursed, shouted, dragged the dogs in widening circles. But Kestrel and Hallie were already gone, hidden in the earth's shadow. Back in the barracks, Tommy Vale finally allowed himself a tiny breath of relief. The toy had done its job. But the night wasn't over. The men still had to reach MI9's extraction caravan beyond the forest. And the Germans were furious now.
The escape no one dared believe. January 12, 1944, 22:43 hours, forest beyond Stalag Luft III. Kestrel and Hallie remained hidden beneath the hollowed oak for nearly a full minute, listening to the guards thrash through underbrush, dragging frightened dogs behind them. The hounds barked in frustration, circling again and again, unable to recover a scent, washed away by the prisoners' ingenuity. Soap dust, pine resin rub, and a zigzag path designed to confuse even trained animals. Hallie exhaled slowly. That was too damn close. Kestrel nodded. Close means alive. 1 more mile. They crawled from beneath the tree, careful not to break twigs or disturb snow that might cast fresh trails. The forest felt alive, branches trembling, owls hooting in the distance, wind carrying cold needles of air across their faces. But beneath it all was the deeper pulse of panic howling through the German ranks behind them. The camp was now awake. Lights flared, sirens wailed in the distance, the watchtowers rumbled as guards repositioned searchlights. Kestrel knew the pattern that came next. Stalag Luft III had been designed not just to hold prisoners, but to break escape attempts with overwhelming response. He grabbed Hallie's shoulder. "Move, now." The 2 men pressed into the trees, following a narrow animal track marked earlier by MI9 operatives infiltrating through Czech resistance networks. This path, known as Fox Line, threaded between evergreen roots until it reached a shallow ravine. They slid down, knees scraping frozen soil. Ahead, faint lantern glow shimmered behind a curtain of brush. Hallie's heart leapt. "That's them!" "Stay low," Kestrel breathed. "Never trust a light until you see the men using it." They crept closer. Forest edge, MI9 rendezvous point, 22:48 hours. A soft whistle echoed, a 3-tone rising pitch. Kestrel answered with the agreed reply, 2 short hums pressed between clenched teeth. The brush parted. A man in a heavy cot check coat appeared, face wrapped in a scarf, his hand extended. "Good evening, gentlemen," he said, accent thick but warm. "Welcome to not freedom yet, but a chance at it." Kestrel and Hallie stepped into the clearing. 2 other agents warmed their hands near a shielded lantern. A sleigh disguised as a wood-hauling sled waited nearby with blankets and fur hides piled atop it. "Quickly," the lead agent muttered. "The Germans are tearing the forest apart." Kestrel glanced behind them. Searchlights stabbed between trees. Dogs howled in distant fury. Men shouted commands. Hallie whispered, "Tommy bought us the time. Let's not waste it." They climbed into the sled. Agent shoveled pine branches and hides over them. The sleigh lurched into motion, pulled by a pair of sturdy Czech draft horses. As they drifted deeper into the woods, the harsh lights from Stalag Luft III faded. The barking quieted. The chaos died behind them. Kestrel whispered into the cold, "Godspeed, boys." Barracks 104, 22:52 hours. Tommy Vale still sat on the edge of his bunk. The spinning toy dangled in his fingers. He had stopped signaling now. The rest was out of his hands. But he continued spinning the button anyway, calm, rhythmic, childlike. It soothed him. It masked his fear, and it kept the Germans convinced nothing was wrong. Merrick's voice drifted from his bunk. They should be clear by now. Tommy nodded. If the forest didn't swallow them, MI9 will. The door slammed open. A guard stormed in, rifle slung, breath hissing white clouds. "Roll call! All standing! Now!" Tommy stood, toy still in hand. The prisoners shuffled into line, faces blank, bodies stiff, eyes avoiding the Germans. The guard scanned the rows, his brow furrowed. "Count again." Another guard marched down the row, tapping each man on the shoulder. 1, 2, 3. The guards paused by Hallie's bunk, then by Kestrel's. The blankets, shaped carefully around pillows and jackets, created silhouettes so convincingly human that the guards didn't dare question what they saw. After all, why would men attempt escape on a night this cold? Why would they leave their blankets behind? Why would they risk the minefields and dogs? The guards thought escape was madness. What they didn't understand was that Tommy Vale specialized in madness that worked. The head guard grunted. "All here," he declared. Tommy almost collapsed from relief. The Germans left, slamming the door behind them. Fryer exhaled. Merrick rubbed his eyes. Tommy placed the toy gently on the table and whispered, "Godspeed, boys." Forest Road, 23:07 hours. The sleigh rolled softly across the snow-covered path, lanterns extinguished, only moonlight guided them. The Czech agent leaned toward Kestrel. "By morning you'll be in safe hands. By next week, England." Kestrel felt his chest tighten, not from fear, but gratitude. Men he had never met before had risked everything tonight. He whispered, "We owe you our lives." The agent shook his head. "No, you owe that to your friend with the toy." Kestrel smiled. A toy that fooled the entire German Guard Corps. The agent chuckled. "MI9 will love that." Months later, MI9 report, London. A single line summarized the entire operation. Escape Group K and H succeeded. Ground signals executed flawlessly. Credit especially due to Vale, T, POW. Improvised whirligig device used for covert signaling. Highly effective. Recommend replication. It became known unofficially as the button that broke a prison. Tommy Vale remained behind the wire until the war's end, but his toy helped free dozens, and the Germans never discovered how their watchtowers were outsmarted by a spinning wire and a coat button.